Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. What happens to our assets when we get old, or become incapable of making decisions about them, or when we die? It's important to start planning now, no matter how old you are, says Michael Jones, partner at tax and advisory firm Mazars. For those who have a self-managed super fund, he says it's worth understanding how much you can contribute in your latter years and what happens to your contributions when you pass away. As Michael explains to Chris Ashmore, self-managed super funds are a very attractive option for those wanting to directly manage their savings.
As a member, they have full control of those savings. But this control's a double-edged sword because as the members age, they have to think and plan carefully about who will control their self-managed super fund when they have reduced capacity or die. So it's a big topic. In this session particularly, I just want to touch a few key issues. I want to talk about actually contributions and some good opportunities for older members. Secondly, I want to talk about a death of a member and touch on what happens there. And thirdly, loss of capacity.
It's a heavy agenda.
It is indeed. But, in my experience, if clients properly manage their affairs, particularly when it relates to assets passing to the next generation, generally they find that it's a really worthwhile task that brings them satisfaction and peace of mind when done properly. So, let's talk about it.
Well, let's start with that first one, contribution opportunities.
Okay, so this is it definitely is a positive. Many members now of self-managed super funds haven't enjoyed that regular super contribution over their whole working life. So, their balances may not be adequate for their retirement. They're caught in this in-between stage. So any opportunity to put some extra money in is very welcome. Since July 2022, the ability of older members to make contributions into super has in fact increased in a couple of ways. I'll just note that if you want to make personal tax-deductible superannuation contributions after age 67, you need to be gainfully employed, and the test for that is that you're remunerated for 40 hours of work in any 30-day period during that year. Okay, that's personal tax-deductible contributions. And the maximum you can do there is $27,500 and get the tax deduction. However, members can also make non-deductible contributions, and they can do these contributions up to the age of 75, provided their super balance is less than 1.7 million at the previous 30 June balance. So, the maximum non-deductible contribution is $110,000, but taking that further, it's possible to bring forward 2 years and make a single contribution of $333,000 that covers the next 3 years. So these are important ways to boost your superannuation benefit.
Well, that's a significant amount if you have less than $1.7 million. But what if you don't have $330,000 or even $110,000?
A good question, Chris. What do you do if you don't have the cash? I think it's worth discussing with your advisor, about contributions. I'll briefly note, though, that there's sort of different ways to make contributions. You can do cash contribution, as we've talked about. You can contribute listed shares, and sometimes if you had listed shares outside of super, it's actually better for them to be in super, depending on your circumstances. You can contribute business property into super, so that's a discussion that would need to be done with your advisor. But you can also recontribute your pension payments. So if you've got a fund that's paying out a pension, you can get the cash from the pension.
What's the point of recontributing pension payments?
Well, every member's balance is split between a taxable component and a non-taxable component. And on death, certain payments from your super fund attract 17% tax on the taxable component. So, for example, if a member dies and the member's super balance is paid to their independent adult child, the taxable component of that super payment is taxed at 17%. Now, the mix of your super's taxable and non-taxable components can be changed when you make new contributions. This change will save tax on a death benefit payment. So even if the contributions are recycled cash from the super fund pension, there can be a real benefit for the member.
Any other changes to contributions?
Two things I'll mention. On 1 July 2023, that limit of 1.7 million that you have to be under to make further contributions will increase to 1.9 million. That's a big increase, and members have to think about that in relation to both contributions and decisions about pensions. Secondly, I would like to note the downsizer rules. Under the downsizer contributions, if you're 60 years or older and you sell your home, you can contribute up to $300,000 into super from the proceeds of that sale. And furthermore, on 1 July 2023, the eligible age will drop to 55 years old. And for downsizer contributions, there is no maximum age, and you don't care about how much you've got in super. They can be made without reference to your super balance. And it doesn't matter if you buy a bigger or smaller home. The only criteria is that you sell your home. So don't be misled by the name downsizer.
Well, now, I hate to do this, Michael, but we better move on to death.
Okay, well, what I want to use in this session is just to prime listeners with the basic things that they should be thinking about regarding superannuation and death. The very first point I want to make is that your will covers personally owned assets only. So if you own assets in a trust, the trust assets are not directly covered by your will. A superannuation fund is a type of trust, and so your super balance will not be covered by your will unless the fund trustees decide to pay your super death benefit into your estate, or if you complete a document before you die that instructs the fund trustees to pay your super balance into your estate.
I didn't realise that. I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't have realised that. That's important.
Yeah, I think so. It's important to get clear advice on what to consider also, whether to pay super into your estate or not. It can be a tricky area, so I really think it should be considered carefully.
What else about super and death?
First of all, not all super payments attract the 17% tax noted earlier, so you really need to understand the particular circumstances that relate to you. For example, a super death payment from one spouse to the other does not attract any tax. The most common taxable super death payment is that payment to an adult child. Secondly, if you take out all your super while you're still alive, there's no tax, okay? So it's worthwhile for people to turn their mind as to how their super will be managed. Tax, by the way, is definitely not the most important thing. Financial independence and clarity within the family on estate matters are more important. However, most listeners to this program and most self-managed super fund members like to manage their affairs with their eyes open. So you need to understand how tax works on super death payments.
Well, Michael, let's now turn to your last topic. What happens when a person loses their capacity to make decisions and perform their duties as a member of a self-managed super fund?
Well, Chris, as we noted at the beginning, the number one principle of self-managed super funds is that the members control the fund and are responsible for the fund. So if a member loses capacity and the member has no enduring power of attorney in place, the fund has a real problem functioning and ultimately would have to make an application to the state to appoint a substitute decision maker. The point is, every member and I firmly believe both young and old, every member of a self-managed super fund should have an enduring power of attorney in place. We don't know what's going to happen, and it's simply good management, and it can't be done after a member has lost capacity.
Michael, can you explain what an enduring power of attorney is?
An enduring power of attorney is simply a legal document that lets you appoint someone to make decisions about personal and or financial matters.
Is it a bit all too hard for older self-managed super fund members?
Oh, I don't think so, but I think it's true that it can be a good time for older members to take stock and consider whether a self-managed super fund is still appropriate for them. There are definite benefits from a retirement investment point of view and estate planning point of view for older members to continue to be in a self-managed super fund, but only if those benefits are important to those members. So it's a very worthwhile discussion to have with your advisor.
That was Michael Jones, partner at Mazars. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.